How do I make the next billion-dollar app, an app that'll make me a billionaire?
I've literally never tried this in the entire time I've used these tools. Yeah. All right. So I didn't give it very much. I asked it for a productivity tool that's web-based. I have no specific features in mind, and the target audience is data science.
And it'll make us $100.
It's going to make us $100. Yeah. So yeah, this is pretty good.
Sick. Now I'm getting a little more scared about the replacing data science things. Because Replit might not replace the data scientist, but a data scientist that uses Replit to replace data scientists might.
Oh yeah. So you upload your file, it cleans it, visualizes it, analyzes it, and exports it for you. And that sounds pretty compelling to me, to be honest.
That is compelling.
Dude, I'm starting to think about like these big BI companies like Tableau and Looker. It just got a lot easier to build in-house.
The most important part is like, I didn't write anything. I didn't write any code.
Yeah.
I wrote all of the code for us, right?
That is so fast as well.
Some people should be scared. Some people should probably be scared, right? Like some people will definitely be scared, but other people it's like, you should use this.
As soon as these tools came out, I was like, oh, wait a second. Like, what used to take me 6 months and something that I'm not necessarily an expert at, you could probably build a web application in like a week, relatively easily.
Today's guest is Colin Matthews, a product leader and educator helping people prototype with AI. He's the founder of Tech for Product and teaches some of the most popular courses on technical fluency and AI prototyping for product managers. He also writes one of the most practical Substacks out there for product builders navigating the new AI stack. In this episode, we dive into one of the most exciting and still unexplored areas in AI today, how to build faster with AI coding tools. We'll explore how AI tools like Replit Cursor and V0 are transforming product prototyping, why AI won't replace engineers, but might replace those who don't use it, how to build a working AI product without writing a single line of code, and why prototyping might be the single best skill you can learn this year. If you work in data, product, engineering, or design, or you're just wondering how to build faster with AI, this episode will show you what's possible and how to get started. And if you've never touched code, Colin's demo will change how you think about building apps. If you enjoy this conversation, don't forget to subscribe to Data Neighbor on your favorite podcast app and YouTube. It's the best way to stay updated and helps us to keep bringing you great content. With that, let's dive into our conversation with Colin Matthews.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Data Neighbor podcast with Sravya and Sean. Today we have Colin Matthews. He is an expert and an educator in AI prototyping, so we're really excited to have this conversation. Welcome, Colin.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming here.
Absolutely.
Cool. Before we get in, Colin, I heard you have a really cool demo for us. And so just the heads up to the audience who's listening on Apple or Spotify or the non-YouTube way, head over to YouTube. It's going to be really cool for the episode. So Colin, to start, what is AI prototyping and how did you get into it?
Yeah, sure. So it's fairly new. Basically, it is using AI coding tools, which you probably heard of at some point. There's kind of a spectrum from like Claude, ChatGPT, over to Cursor and other tools. But using those tools for the purpose of creating kind of like quick one-time experiences for testing an idea, right? So if you work in product or engineering or any type of role like that, you're probably used to like someone comes up with an idea for a feature to ship. It takes a long time to build the feature. You ship it to production. You see if your users like it. And maybe they do and maybe they don't. And you have some iterations or revisions and you kind of continue from there. So the kind of core thesis is, can we use these AI coding tools to build like better, more interactive experiences up front, test those early on to see if anyone actually wants the thing we're going to build before we build it, and then, make a decision based on that. So that's kind of the idea.
Nice.
Got it.
We have like a hack day at my work in a month. I'm pretty excited for it this year because in previous years, it's always like, I'm a data scientist. I'm like, okay, I got to do like data science work for my hack day project because that's like my wheelhouse. But I'm like, oh, I could like mess around with the product potentially. So it's pretty cool, like giving that power to other kind of like roles.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for data science, maybe a good one is like how the user actually interacts with some type of like, prediction or classification. And you're obviously building more like the pipeline and like the model, but maybe some input or some thoughts on like, hey, actually, I think if we presented it in this way, that'd be pretty cool. So you can mock that kind of stuff up pretty easily.
Nice.
Yeah. Does that mean in today's world and today's age, if I have an idea and I want to pitch to a VC, like a slide deck is no longer good enough?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I don't talk to VCs that often too, so I can't give you the inside scoop there. But I do think, I mean, it's really not that hard, especially if you're technical, to build something functional using these AI coding tools, get it in front of users, and then see if it actually resonates or not. One thing that's kind of funny is in the past, business people have thought that like they need technical skills to build their idea. So it's a barrier. They don't ever start. And then technical people think that they need like a business person sometimes to build, so they never start. Now I feel like you can do it all by yourself. And then that leaves you with just like the actual problem, which is you don't know how to get users, which is probably the whole problem from the beginning. But anyway, so yeah, you can definitely build functional things, get it out in the world, see if anyone cares, and find out no one does, and then try again.
You can create agents to be your users for you. Yeah. Prolification of a bot.
Yeah. So Colin, how did you get into this field in the first place?
Yeah, so I have a product background, I'm a PM, and so like most PMs, I want to build products. That's what I find interesting and compelling. But I actually did my undergraduate in computer science and had planned on going to become an engineer. So I built quite a few web applications just on my own. And like that experience was painful, like doing the whole end-to-end development. It would take me like 6 months to build something, again, put it out in the world, find out no one wants to use it. And so like by the fifth and sixth one that I built, I actually got users and, made some money and all that good stuff, like had some minor successes.
Nice.
But it did take a number of approaches and attempts for me to get there. And so as soon as these tools came out, I was like, oh, wait a second, like what used to take me 6 months and something that I'm not necessarily an expert at, I could probably do in a much shorter period of time. And I think that is panning out. Again, if you're more technical, it's going to be easier, but I think you could probably build a web application in like a week relatively easily to test whatever it is that you think you might want to do.
What do you think is like the biggest challenge for non-technical builders that they face when trying to use these AI prototyping products?
Yeah, most people, I'm going to say it this way first, then we'll get into the specifics. I think AI is really good at helping you do something you already know how to do and like making it faster and automating components of it, because you can recognize when it's making mistakes. And so if it starts going off in like a random direction, if you don't understand that it's making a mistake, you're just going to compound that mistake over and over and over again, right? To be specific, a lot of non-technical users don't understand how web apps are built. Like that you have servers and you have databases, you need a data model, your client needs to communicate to the server, you need to host all that stuff somewhere, you need to set up authentication, like just the basics.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have a mental model for how it's going to work. And if you're going to make a change, like, oh, I want to add a new form field, what does that mean for this, the system? Like, are you changing the client, the server, the database, all that stuff to even be able to talk to the AI correctly? So that's by far the largest barrier for non-technical folks.
Okay. So in that regard, we probably all have heard like, hey, AI is replacing engineers. AI is making coders irrelevant, and everybody's downsizing and stuff like that. Is that overblown?
Yeah, I think so for sure. I do think that it's likely that you can have fewer people do the same amount of work, because if you have a tool or a system that allows you to like 2 or 3x your output in a day, then of course eventually that'll happen. And I mean, the way that I think it'll happen is like there'll be startups that have very small teams that succeed, and then enterprises will see that happening, and then they'll be like, oh, how are they doing that? How can I adopt the same tools? Because obviously startups typically, or small companies, are a little bit more nimble in terms of the tooling that they're using. Given some life cycle of like, I don't know, a couple of years, it'll be commonplace. But yeah, I don't really see us getting to a point where like we don't need engineers anymore, like anything like that, because the problems are a lot of like the same problems engineers solve now, which is like system design, right? Like coding is a medium for your thoughts, right? The code part isn't the part that matters. And so I think that's still true. And unless there's like a fantastic system design AI that can somehow interface with like a code AI and it all works seamlessly, I don't see that happening.
Yeah, that's actually a really great point. I love how you kind of frame it, because like it's pretty polarizing out there, right? Like people are either, hey, this is going to change the world, or like, hey, this is not going to manifest into anything.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can already tell that it is definitely going to do something. Like if you've used Cursor or you've tried to use an AI tool in your work, it's pretty obvious that it's going to be different, but it's just like, what exactly will be different? And yeah, as I mentioned, I think like basic stuff where you already know how to do it, well, you'll largely automate, and then you'll spend most of your time on the harder problems.
I found myself doing something interesting today. So I use Cursor, and I leveraged like the Jupyter Notebooks extension and Cursor, and I was just I was doing some more complicated stuff, like doing some sort of like text parsing and matching, and then creating some metrics out of that. And then I found that some of the metrics weren't exactly what I thought they were, but I was like, I have to go back through this like code it wrote that's like not how I would have written it, and try and figure out where the error is. And then the weird thing is then like when I was kind of like diagnosing the problem, I was like, all right, I'm going to do some like just like summary statistics, group by some things. But I just found myself going back to like telling Cursor to do it, being like, give me a group by on this and a sum of these things. And I was like, okay, actually, that's a really simple code that I can write that like it's actually longer for me to explain. I could tell the Cursor to do it like 2 times and it didn't do it. I was like, oh, I should have just written that one.
Yeah.
So it's kind of have to figure out my balance of when do I lean on it first, certain things where I should just do it myself. But already I'm finding it in my workflow where it's like I need it to be there, and I've only been using it for like a month.
Yeah. The debugging part is definitely the hardest part, even if you are technical, because when you write the code, like you first have to understand what you're building and then you type it.
Yeah.
When you don't use Cursor, it just like writes a bunch of stuff and then you have to do it the other way. You have to go back and read all the code to figure out what it did wrong. And I mean, I'm sure you know, it's a lot easier to like write it correctly the first time than it is to go try to figure out what someone else did.
Yeah.
And then like make the correct changes, right? That's just generally a harder thing to do. But for like web development and stuff like that, you know, it's a lot of it's canned stuff. Like there's UI libraries. You want to put the button in the form and all that stuff. So I think it's easier to get UIs closer to what you want with AI than like what you're describing.
Got it.
Interesting.
Something you mentioned was like for a prototype, it might take you a week. Now, how long did it take you before with like traditional prototyping methods? What do you find to be some like, I guess the core differences in like who you needed to be involved, what those processes looked like?
Yeah. So unless you're kind of like an all-in-one, you know, engineer, designer, PM combo, generally you'd have like a designer or someone with design skills do mocks in Figma. You might pay a freelancer to do that if you're not, you know, doing that person. I've done that before.
Yeah.
I've paid people to do that work for me. And then you might try to test that with users before you actually commit to building. But honestly, like doing user testing on a Figma mock is kind of meh. You don't get the best feedback all the time. Like people can't really test the tool.
Yeah.
Especially if we're talking about things like, you know, in the realm of like data science or machine learning, it's like, it would tell you about this recommendation, right?
Yep. Yeah.
But like where, you know, there's no way to feel it really, like if it's good or not. And so anyway, you try to do some validation with the Figma mocks, then you go and build it. And the build it part takes a very long time, right? You know, if it's like a side thing you're doing on the weekend, or, you know, you're not a proficient engineer, it takes a while. So yeah, for me, like I think the fastest I shipped anything was 3 months. And then,
Wow.
Okay.
and again, I was working full time, so it's not like I was working on anything full time, any side projects full time, but
Yeah.
3 months would be the shortest. And yeah, from there you try to get users, and like I kind of alluded to at the beginning, all of these other things distract you from the fact that you need to solve that problem, but you get to solve all the fun parts first.
Yeah.
And then you get to the end and you're like, oh, wait a second, I just spent 5 months on something that
To
like,
sell it.
yeah, I need to figure out how to get people to use it. So I actually think that's one of the major benefits, is that it forces you to run into that problem earlier.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so since our audience, a lot of them are in the data field, we would definitely get into the example or the demo that you have, Colin, on that. But before that, I want to maybe like just take a run through of how you would go, you know, like from end to end in terms of, you know, hey, I have an idea. How do I pick a tool? How do I, like, what framework should I use? How do I, you know, like what techniques would be useful? Like maybe we can kind of do like a step 1 to 5 or something. So let's say I have an idea. I want to build whatever, the next $1 billion startup. How do I start? What tool should I?
It's money printing. We're printing money. This is the startup.
Money printer.
Okay.
There's so many tools out there. What do I do? Which one do I pick?
Sure. Yeah. So this largely depends on your level of technical skill. If you already can ship by yourself, you know how to use a code editor, you know how to use GitHub, you can use some type of cloud hosting environment, and not necessarily like AWS, because that's confusing for a lot of even production, like enterprise users, but maybe something simpler like Heroku or Railway. If any of these things sound familiar, then I think Cursor is probably your best bet, because you're going to want like a deeper level of control that Cursor provides, and also like maybe your own tooling and stack that you like to use, right? And so yeah, Cursor is definitely the best tooling there. In terms of like the actual stack, generally like sticking with a JavaScript stack is a good idea because for whatever reason, like there's just so much JavaScript code in the world that's been trained on. And so like they perform well on JavaScript as compared to like some obscure language that you might use. Not that like, Ruby's not obscure, but as compared to JavaScript, it kind of is at this point. And so I typically do like React or Express for the front end. I use Node for the server, and then I use Postgres for the DB. So it's like a pretty standard, relational database, and then that stack there, a client server database. And yeah, you can host that on whatever you want. I use Railway for my hosting when I'm doing it myself, just because you can sync directly from GitHub to Railway and it'll deploy all of that stuff for you. So you can do client server and DB, and it basically just handles the whole thing for you. If that all sounded like gibberish to you, then your other options are to use tools that handle a lot of that stuff for you. And so the best one's actually one that we'll use today, which is Replit. So Replit is a very similar tool actually to what we just described. It does client server database. The nice part is it's all in one environment. So like you want a database, you click a button and say add a database, and it provisions a PostgreSQL database for you, right? So like I don't need to know how to do anything. Actually don't even need to click the button. I can ask the agent add a database for me in text, and it'll just do it. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, Replit's like an all-in-one container for everything you might need. It has authentication. It has like, file storage if you're doing like S3 stuff. Whatever kind of a permutation is, it exists in Replit, at least in a basic format.
Nice. And then what are some, I would assume it's not just, so let's say we've picked the tool. I'm assuming it's not as straightforward as, hey, build me this thing that I have in my head, and then like just vomit what I have in mind. Is there like hacks and techniques that you found useful? Yeah,
for sure. So a couple of things here. Like one is that the AI's tools generally struggle with context. Like that's kind of the biggest problem that they have, is understanding what files they should be looking at when you put in a request and then making the correct modifications. And so generally what you want to do is you want to try to follow a happy path as much as possible. And if you run out, like kind of diverge from that, where like there's a bunch of bugs and you have to fix it, eventually you probably want to like figure out the root causes and then revert back to where everything was working and just fix that problem. And you maybe see me go through that today, but if you start heading down like this pathway and you're just typing in the text box, it's going to change like all your files while you're trying to debug. And then eventually it works, but you're in a very different place than when you started trying to solve that issue, right? So kind of like an iterative approach, kind of doing a bit of planning ahead of time goes a long way. One like little tip here that I often do is I create a file, a .md file that is my plan, and I put it inside of the file editor, like in Replit or whatever tool, and then I can ask it to refer back to that .md file, and that file is basically my spec, right? And it has a broken down, like for web apps, it's like, what are the components, what is like the styling and the design, what fonts are we using, and then what's the implementation phases. So like, phase 1 through N of like the ordering of how we're going to build this thing, and that kind of guides us towards that happy path, right? Like we can keep referring back to that with the AI agent to say like, how we finished phase 1, what went wrong in phase 2, blah, 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 blah. But it gives us like a very specific place to refer back to rather than just the chat history where the AIs like get very confused. You can send them down a pathway with the chat history where like they have no idea what's going on anymore. So a couple of things I guess I mentioned there, but a few options in terms of best practices.
That's a great idea. I feel like I've definitely been in conversations with Claude or ChatGPT where I'm trying to like get something going, and I'm now at like my 10th iteration of like, no, that's not what I'm looking for.
Right.
And it's lost the context. So I really like the idea of like reverting back to where the first error first occurred, and then having like that like markdown file with the spec. So is that something you also like leverage AI to build out in the beginning? Nice.
Yeah. So
cool.
Depending on the tool, you can actually like put in custom instructions on how the tool should behave. Replit doesn't support this, but Bolt and V0 do, as well as Lovable. And so one of the instructions that I put in as like a global prompt for all of my projects is to start with an MD file. I call it PRD.md file. You can literally call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
But start with a .md file that contains like these things. And so I could type in something like, make me a to-do app. And the behavior is that it spits out a PRD first, right? Because I have this global system prompt, and then kind of continue from there. So yeah, that's another like kind of quick tip. You can just do it regularly in the chat box. You don't need a system prompt. It just helps with like not having to repeat myself constantly.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds super helpful too, because I mean, when I first used these tools, and to build games and like to build just side stuff. Like I get lost myself. We're not even talking about the AI getting lost. Like I was lost. I was like, where am I headed with this? Or like, and it's like the AI is confused. I was confused, and then we're doubly confused. That's only because I've never planned it out. Like I'm just like, hey, I want this sort of game, but like there's no specifics. And then that was what I gave the agent, and it's like, okay, what do you want? Let me just guess it all the way. And it's like, okay, that's not what I want. So that's super helpful tip.
I like to think of this like, if your PM or someone in like a businessy role comes to you and says like, hey, could you build a model that, does X? And you're like, okay, that's not enough information. Like, I need to know this and this and this and this. It's the exact same relationship, right? But you are the person who's not providing enough information now. And so you need to like think of it the same way, right? Like almost always it's just like, you should be more specific. That will solve your problem. Up until the point of like, like adding console logs when there's bugs and like copying and pasting the logs into the AI and saying like, hey, here's all of the state. Like, take a look at the logs and tell me what the problem is. You just need to constantly push yourself to be more specific because it can't figure it out on its own, to be honest.
Yeah. So everyone basically should become a PM at this point.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that, but I mean, in a lot of ways, it's a similar relationship. I don't know. Maybe technical people think PMs are not that smart and they don't know what they're talking about. The AI agent thinks you don't know what you're talking about. It's the same thing. So yeah.
Well, do you see, I guess, kind of like the roles reversing a bit or more like converging, like PMs becoming more technical because of the tools that they have now, and then let's say like data scientists, machine learning engineers now are required to be more thoughtful because like I guess the PMs can do some sort of their work as well.
My perspective on this is kind of like, I think it's useful independently of AI for that to be true. Like if AI had never been invented, that's probably still would have been a good idea for like PMs to be more technical and for like, whatever other technical role to understand the business context better and understand user problems better, because there's really no harm that ever comes out of that. And I've only ever seen good things come out of that. So I would advocate for that independently of AI. I think with AI, it becomes more true because again, if you have smaller teams, you don't necessarily need a PM if you have like an engineer who's product minded and can kind of like help lead the decisions. If you have enough other engineers who with AI can like execute on the roadmap, right? You don't need to keep hiring more engineers or vice versa. Maybe you have a PM who can like take on some engineering tasks here and there if they, have that experience. I think with a smaller team, you might see like people who take on those functions, but I don't know if it's going to be like a change in the job role. Like, I don't know if we're going to have like PM/engineer is going to be like a common job or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, I do find like the best like analysts or data scientists are the ones who like have like a strong product mindset. And then I find like the PMs I really like working with are ones who had some background in engineering or data science or analytics. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I was an engineer, but like, oh, I was like a CS minor or something. Because in both ways, like people can be a little more autonomous, but also the collaboration's way better too, because you're speaking each other's language, and so much easier when it's like such like distinct roles and skill sets. I find it a lot harder.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I teach a course called Technical Foundations for PMs, which has nothing to do with AI. It's literally just helping PMs become more technical for the purpose of communication.
Yeah.
And one of the things I often say in that course is that like, if you think about it from the engineer's perspective, like when you go to talk to them, they have to translate what you're saying to like what they know, right? Like they are doing a translation, and somehow like you expect them to not, like you have no responsibility in this translation. Like they have to do all of it both ways, right? Like I as a PM just show up and say my stuff. Engineer has to translate to technical and then translate back to product and say, no, this is, what I needed or blah, blah, blah. And so I push them a little bit to like, it's not really fair. You should at least do some of the translation, either one way or the other. Because otherwise, like, you just have communication breakdowns. And that's usually honestly where like a lot of product problems happen. Like, oh no, we didn't hit our roadmap. It's because someone didn't understand something about, it was a miscommunication. So.
Yeah. Back to the prototyping. So you mentioned Cursor. If you have like a tech stack you're working with and you're familiar with that, that's probably like the way to go. If you don't, like Replit kind of takes care of a lot of that for you. You also mentioned like Bolt, or are there any other kind of AI prototyping tools you've kind of worked with, and where they kind of fall on that spectrum?
Yeah. So I actually use some of these other ones more than I use the ones I mentioned. So Bolt, Bolt, Lovable, V0. Those are probably the most kind of common ones. The difference is that they are primarily focused on, let's say, the client side, and they integrate with third parties for the backend. So you have to connect to Supabase if you're familiar with that product to basically run your server-side functions as well as your database. And so at times I've found that that integration with Supabase is not as good as Replit's ability to manage the entire stack just together, if that makes sense. Replit does a better job of understanding kind of the full stack context because it's all hosted and kind of deployed together. Not to say that like Lovable and Bolt and V0 can't work. It's just not as good in my opinion, or not as consistent. So yeah, I typically use those other tools for just client-side prototyping. And I guess this is another tip if you are like planning on building something. There is no reason to add a database or a server at the beginning. You can literally mock everything just in the client and then put it in front of a user. You don't even have to integrate with like, you know, if you want to do like an AI thing with Anthropic or OpenAI, you can just mock the AI responses and just have them like literally as plain text in a JSON file in the client, and they type something in and then it responds back. But you can make it as simple as you want, right? And just mock everything on the client to test your idea rather than like getting into the complexity of managing all this infrastructure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. Colin, do you want to show us the demo? I'm super excited
for sure.
about it.
Yeah, let me share my screen and we'll run through it. So we're going to do, I can't remember what the data set is called, but it's like the Lotus Petals data set. I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with this one. And we're going to run that through just an analysis of that in Replit. So just want to make sure you can see my screen okay before I get going here.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So this is Replit. Replit is the only tool out of the set we talked about that can run Python code. So it's probably going to be popular with the folks who are interested in data science because you can basically do, you know, like whatever you do in Python normally, you can do in here as well. So we'll just go ahead and say complete an analysis of the Lotus Petal data set using Python and Streamlit. And I'm not really going to give it any other direction. If I wanted to, I could use this like enhanced prompt button here. We'll just maybe click it to just see what it says. But usually I find actually shorter is better. Sometimes this adds in requirements that we don't want, like, you know, authentication and like databases and all this other stuff.
Okay.
So that's just one thing is like, you want to be as specific as you can and make sure that extra stuff doesn't get added in. And so let's see here. We have data analysis website focused on exploring and visualizing the Iris Loadable Petals dataset using Python and Streamlit, and some style guides. Actually, this looks pretty reasonable, right? In terms of the requirements. So we'll go ahead and kick that off.
Someone reads your mind, or something reads your mind.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so usually what Replit does is it responds back with a bit of a plan at the beginning. We just have to approve that plan, and then it will kick off the actual implementation. And yeah, this one's a nice one because obviously like Streamlit allows us to do some basic data visualizations in a UI using Python code. So it's a nice and quick, easy way to kind of get this going. And I would recommend not clicking off any of these. As mentioned, like they struggle with context. So you add a bunch of features at the beginning, like the quality is just going to be worse. So you take that iterative approach instead.
Got it.
Yeah. And then, from here, it'll write our code. So you'll see like once it kicks off, it goes pretty quick in terms of actually building out this application.
Nice.
Very cool. And for listeners on streaming platforms, if you don't see videos, head on over to YouTube.
Yeah, and then we'll see what it does in terms of its approach. It looks like it's using Plotly and some other stuff. I might ask it to do like some kind of classification with random forest or something after.
Yeah.
If it doesn't do it by default. Sorry, I can't really scroll right now. It's stealing my mouse.
No worries.
Well, let's see how it does.
Pair plot. I saw some sort of 3D plot, or it's some PCA, and now it's plotting the PCA.
Yeah, we'll take a look afterwards at
Yeah.
what it did here. Again, if I wanted to be specific, I could have obviously put that in the message up front, like to do a specific type of classification or use a specific library.
Gotcha.
And it would have helped with that.
Okay, and then I see it says it has like checkpoint made. So can you go back to these different checkpoints later? Or is that kind of what you were talking about when you're like, refer back to like when you first saw an error?
Yeah, exactly. So it's actually just Git. You can like click into this little tools section on the left-hand side and go to Git in here, and everything has Git configured by default. And the agent will make commits automatically for you. So you can see that we have commits down here. And so
nice.
You can roll back. If anyone's familiar with Git, it's literally just normal version control stuff. Nice. And we got an error. So that's kind of fun actually, because what it's going to do now, you can see it continuing down the left-hand side. I took a screenshot of the error, and it's going to continue on its own to try to resolve this problem.
Dang, that's pretty cool. Because like I'll run into this error. It's very similar all the time when I'm trying to do some analysis in Cursor. I just have an imported library, or it's not installed on my machine or in my virtual environment, and I have to like copy and paste it or just like do it myself. But it's just doing it for you. That's so cool.
Yeah, so you can see it's installing the relevant libraries, right, down here. And then it just kind of keeps going. Now, this can be a good thing or a bad thing because it can like just keep going in the bad direction too, right? Like,
oh yeah,
it just goes indefinitely. So you can pause it or try to interrupt it. But this is again where the requirements are so critical that you input something that is like extremely specific about what you want, unless you really don't care, kind of like what we did here, and we just want to see what it comes up with. But if you have a vision in mind, you want to be very specific with the input. Otherwise, yeah, it can go down a weird direction.
Yeah, it's like hit open a token or a monthly limit, transferring money from bank account
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, exactly.
That is AI going rogue.
Cool. And then this is what we got.
Whoa, okay.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
For our listeners on Spotify, I mean, you should just go look at it. It's on YouTube, but it's basically created a web app of the analysis. It's not just like a notebook kind of analysis.
Yeah, so we have a couple. Actually, I mean, this is one funny thing also about doing this is like I have no idea how this application works. So we're gonna both experience it in real time because
Yeah.
I don't know what it did.
Yeah.
So we can do, different box plots, I guess, with the different attributes in the data set, right? In terms of what is this? The petal length, I guess. Oh yeah, so we can change what the attribute is and then the box plot for each classification. And then we have some scatter plots with the X and Y axis that are customizable, and histograms, and then some type of correlation.
Dude,
matrix.
I'm starting to think about like these like big BI companies like Tableau and like Looker and all this stuff where it's like it just got a lot easier to build in-house.
Yeah. And then I actually don't know what a pair plot is. I assume you do. But this is a pair plot. And then we have a PCA. We should hopefully, there's our PCA. So yeah, not a bad start. I think maybe I want to do like, can you add some tree-based classifiers? Yeah, we'll just go with that.
Nice.
So, random forest and maybe just a regular decision tree and I don't know, whatever else. It was intentionally vague just so that it had a little bit of room to decide. And I think that's a bit more fun for the demo. Again, if you want something specific, you should say what you want.
As it's doing this, do you know what like are there different tiers for using Replit? Like what's kind of like the pricing structure look like?
Yes, Replit is both a hosting platform and like the AI kind of interactions that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a free tier. I think you get some number of messages. I can't remember exactly what it is, but let's say it's 5 or 10 messages per day. And then on the paid tier, how it works is you get a $25 credit and it costs $25 a month. And then that credit goes towards whatever usage you have. So for example, you can deploy to like a VM and have it running all the time. So that would be some consumption of your $25. Let's say it costs like 10 cents a day or something, right? To run that VM. And then each agent message costs 25 cents. And so that would be some of the consumption as well. And so this kind of combination of the ways you can consume usage is how they've put it together.
Gotcha. So it's usage based rather than like a monthly subscription kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And you can definitely go over the $25. I've done that more than once.
Yeah, I remember I was using the free version of Replit, and then I guess I wasted 5 checkpoints of it out of 10 on just debugging. It was pretty funny.
I guess it speaks to the like actual monetary value of creating that like PRD in the very beginning and being really thorough in your requests.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing I'll add is there are actually 2 different tools here. So you have the assistant and the agent. So you see this one's 25 cents, this one's 5 cents. The assistant is kind of like more like a cursor, I guess. Maybe not the agent mode, like the chat mode, where if I say something, it'll make a very small change. Usually it's like, oh, I'm going to fix these 5 lines, right?
Gotcha.
Where the agent, you can see it just keeps changing stuff indefinitely until it thinks it's solved the prompt that I put in.
Right.
So the agent really kind of feels more like, you might classify as like an actual agent where it has all the various tools. It can do a bunch of stuff. The assistant is these kind of like minor iterations over time.
Looks like it's taking a screenshot.
Yep. Yeah, it takes a screenshot at the end of each iteration to double check that it actually loaded. That's kind of its way to validate
Oh, that's so cool.
that's pretty
everything's
smart.
working. Yeah. So let's see what we got. Let's scroll down a little bit. Maybe it's towards the bottom. Okay, yeah. So we have tree-based classification models. We have decision tree, random forest, and gradient boost. And so let's just take a look at this one. It looks like it already ran for the decision tree. Yeah, so here's our decision tree, right? And then, I don't know, a bunch of stuff, decision boundaries.
Yeah.
So
Can you switch to another? Yeah.
Yeah,
Wait.
let's try the random forest. And you can see it's running in the top right. So this is just a scikit-learn thing.
Okay.
Or sorry, Streamlit thing. So yeah, I ran it. Here's our feature importance with random forest. And we don't get the visualization for whatever reason of the tree, but that's okay. And then, yeah, we'll try gradient boost as well. And yeah, we get, some metrics, confusion matrix, again, feature importance, and then decision boundary. So yeah, I mean, in terms of like this as compared to a notebook, I mean, I do think this is kind of a cool way to share some analysis if you wanted to do it that way. And then, people can play around with it a little bit more. It's also maybe a bit more user-friendly for people who are not in technical roles and like don't know how to maybe, boot up the notebook and get it connected and pull the data from where they need to pull it and run the cells and all that stuff. So yeah, different options. But I mean, I guess the most important part is like, I didn't write anything. I didn't write any code.
Yeah.
I wrote all of the code for us, right?
That is so fast as well. I mean, like in the old days, by the time we're done with all of these code, we're too tired to even look at it, right?
Yeah.
Like we're like, hey, it's been a long whatever, like day, week, or whatever. Like it's been a long time since this is done, and it's like, okay, I'm just gonna let it be, and then your business impact stops there because you're like, you don't complete the most important thing, which is like understand what the data is trying to tell you, and you're just like, hey, I'm so tired because of the grunt work. This is so cool, and we took like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and there you go.
Yeah. To be fair, so no one gets scared that their jobs can get replaced by Replit immediately. There are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of analysis of the Iris data set on the internet. So like this isn't, I'm sure it's pulling from a lot of that kind of stuff too, versus like there's lots of intricacies for like your internal business logic and data set at your job and what your stakeholders want. Pretty powerful.
Yeah.
I think some people should be scared. Some people should probably be scared, right? Like some people will definitely be scared, but other people it's like, you should use this.
Yeah. I think 100% agree. Like, I mean, one is I didn't even have to give it the data set. It just knew what I was talking about and then somehow found it. So that's obviously very abnormal in that.
Oh, you didn't preload the data set to it?
No, like you saw what I did from beginning to end. I did not tell it where the data set was. Yeah. So, that's obviously a very big difference. Like we didn't clean any data at a time. We didn't do any kind of like, we didn't do anything that you normally do.
Yeah.
So yeah, very, very different experience in terms of the speed, mostly because of that, right? And not because of, the actual visualization part. Maybe this is a useful tool once you get to the end, right?
So what happens when you do like really vague kind of things like I said, how do I make the next $1 billion app? If you're like, make me an app that'll make me a billionaire, like it just like does it at least like respond like does it give you, I guess this one kind of like gave us some like follow-up questions first, so I didn't just go off and start doing things.
I've literally never tried this in the entire time I've used these tools. So
if this works, we're cutting it from the podcast and we all just keep running this.
Yeah,
it'll be paid content.
Yeah. All right. So it's asking me a couple of questions. Let's say one-time paid app, because that's probably the easiest instead of subscriptions.
I'm so curious what it's thinking of right now.
Yeah. Okay. So it's going to ask us a lot of questions until we basically provided the spec, right? So
okay.
Productivity tool, which I mean, in and of itself is
that's pretty cool.
Kind of cool. Yeah.
I mean, even that is like amazing value add because
it's like great brainstorming partner.
Yeah,
it's asking you the questions rather. I feel like when I use ChatGPT a lot, I'm like asking it things, but it's not like a conversation back and forth unless I tell it to like, hey, ask me these things.
Yeah. All right. So I didn't give it very much. I asked it for a productivity tool that's web-based. I have no specific features in mind in the target audience is data science.
And it'll make us $100.
It's going to make us $100. Yeah. So let's see what it comes up with. Just for fun. Why not? But maybe we can make $100 off this.
Oh man, that's such a cool. Maybe we can run like a sweepstakes or something. Like if any of our audience goes and actually implements something like this, then they win something.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if you guys listened to Hard Fork from the New York Times. They had a thing a few weeks ago where they were like, send us your vibe coding projects. And they had like 65 people like send them in and they walked through a few of them. It was really cool.
Yeah. One other thing I'll add just while it's working on this is, one of the, again, kind of go back a little bit. One of the problems with vibe coding is that if you're not able to do it yourself, you can also spot the issue. So like I think it's very easy to like make mistakes with like authentication or security or like your Stripe integration, like things that really matter, right? But because you're doing vibe coding and you don't know how it works, if you can click the button and it looks like it works, then you're like satisfied.
Yeah.
And so, that's like one risk with some of this stuff. But,
the security and privacy is so. That's the first thing that popped into my head when I was like, you can't just script, but really good for proof of concept, like where you're not setting that stuff up.
How do you, Colin, I guess to Sean's earlier point of debugging, what's the best practice there, given, like we hope it doesn't make a mistake, but it makes a whole ton of mistakes still?
Yeah, sure. So the thing that I do the most is I write in, basically to explain an issue to me. If there's an issue that pops up, explain it to me and to not write any code. So most of the time what people do is like they type in something like, please fix this or fix it or like, this is the problem. Like, can you, some variation of that.
Yeah.
What I do is say, okay, like here's the problem. Here's the supporting information. Like if I have logs or something like that, right? Can you explain the issue? Don't write any code. And just giving it that step to like do the analysis first and then you implement the solution the second, I find is like, I'm not going to say a percentage, but it has a much better, probability of correctly identifying the issue rather than writing code as a response to you asking it to fix it. And I think part of the reason for this is that like, we're all using Sonnet 3.7 basically behind the scenes. And so it is capable of synthesizing information if you ask it to, but the tools we're using like Replit and Cursor force it to write code, right? As a default response. So if you say like, that's not working, can you fix it? It's going to write code. It's not going to like say, oh, I actually don't know what the problem is.
Right. I have seen that actually.
Can you give me more information? It just writes code because that's what it's built to do. So if you prompt it to kind of take that first step of planning a solution first and then implementing a second, usually that's kind of the best approach.
Yeah. And I like what you said about like setting up logging and stuff. It's just like, what would you do in a regular business? Like you would set up logging in your product, but you'd also like set up some like metrics for analysis, like have it set all that stuff up and then analyze it to figure out what's going on, explain it.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess one of the other tip is I wouldn't do what we're doing here at all. Because like I literally have no idea what it's doing right now.
Yeah.
And we're gonna get some result at the end and
it's gonna be a $1 billion app, right?
Yeah.
Man, I'm so curious what it's
I'm really curious. Colin,
it's like it's building a bunch of plots or something. It was like a bunch of figures.
Yeah, it looks like it's
creating a pie chart.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I
It's
might
a
have
productivity
an idea.
tool. So I'm just like, okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, technically anything can be productivity.
Yeah.
Other than entertainment. So, Colin, one question. We've heard a lot about prototyping. How about, I guess, kind of like if you were to are these productional
Yeah.
per Davey?
I think they can be. I think like I have a couple of applications that I'm hosting, in production that have users that I either started in Replit and then pulled out to Cursor. It's a workflow that I do sometimes, or I was able to do the whole thing in Replit. Usually they're pretty simple, like they're very straightforward applications. They're not extremely complex, but I have like auth, I have a database hooked up, but it does all of the things that you'd expect it to do, but it's not very complex. So I think for stuff like that, you can actually do it. If it's going to be more complex, again, like I'd recommend probably pulling it out of the tool like this one, iterating with Cursor, and then deploying on your own, just because these tools eventually will struggle to identify the correct context more than Cursor does. Like I don't know why, but Cursor does a really good job of like identifying the correct changes to make as compared to these tools. They really struggle with that.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And then you have to deal with the maintenance piece, right? Like once you rely on it as your base code, I guess.
Yeah, that can also be tricky too if you don't know how to code, because it can end up making unintentional changes that you don't test. So this is also where like testing is pretty important. For non-technical folks, I recommend they just test every feature every single time they make an iteration before they ship it. Don't assume that like, the thing that you said to change, it's only changed that context. It could have changed a bunch of other stuff. But if you're more technical, you can write unit tests for something like this as well, and that'll work.
Does Replit do like the accept reject changes kind of thing like Cursor does, or can't do that, or no? It just
goes. Yeah, I mean,
just YOLO.
Exactly.
Commit,
like if I put in another prompt,
merge,
it will change. It could change every file.
Dang. I
Right.
really like how Cursor does that. That's like one of the things that like helps me figure out what's going on with it. It's like, okay, this is what's changing right here.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you'd ever get Cursor to respond with, I think we're probably at past like 2,000 lines of code at this point.
Yeah.
I don't think you could get
Yeah.
Cursor to do that. It's going to change like, maybe 50 to 100 to maximum like 200 lines of code at a time, right?
And you're just getting charged for your agent message, not per token. Or how does
it
that
does.
work?
Yeah, so it does charge per message, but one interesting thing here is like they can sometimes group together more than them, or like they can basically charge you for multiple messages in response to a single request if it generates enough code.
Okay.
So this probably costs like, I don't know, $1, maybe
Okay.
$2 in
we can Venmo you, man. I think it's because who knows when this is going to stop.
I think
This
we're almost there.
podcast may go for a few hours.
Yeah. I think we're almost there. It looks like we're running some, installation commands and
Yeah.
we should be seeing the result. I'd be very shocked if this works, but we'll see. I'm not going to bother trying to debug it if it doesn't work because I have
Yeah.
absolutely no clue what it was supposed to do. But yeah, we'll see.
Oh man, I feel like this is one of the most fun episodes.
There's a lot of suspense, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's like nobody knows what's coming, like literally.
Yeah. I just keep telling the Spotify people to come to YouTube and watch this thing, create this app.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool to watch.
Oh, it looks like it's closed. Well, you can view in your browser now.
Man. Well, actually,
Suspense.
we're not going to have to Venmo you anything because you're going to make $100 right now. So
Yeah. All right, let's take a look.
Hey, I like the very compelling message here.
Yeah,
welcome to DataSense.
Data analysis made simple for non-technical users. So you upload your file, it cleans it, visualizes it, analyzes it, and exports it for you. And that sounds pretty
Whoa.
compelling to me,
Yeah.
to be honest.
That is
Doesn't
compelling.
work.
Yeah. So do we want to try this just for fun?
Yeah, we should try it.
All right. Here, 1 second. Let me go over to Claude. Write a CSV for me of transaction data with at least 9 columns.
Hey, coincidentally, I actually know of companies that are trying to do this, literally. So maybe at the end of the day, it is true that it's going
Yeah.
to be $1 billion business.
Yeah. Well, we started with 100, so maybe the next
Yeah,
prompt should be
100.
how do we make 1,000, and then how do we make
Yeah.
10,000? We'll just keep increasing it. All right. So we have this CSV here, data.md. I'm just going to rename the file for some reason.
With how easy making fake data is these days.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the best features of this whole thing is just how easy that was. And let me just double check that it's actually correct before I load it in.
Okay, so this is his third AI tool he's opening of the session.
Yeah, well, this is just a text editor. I just wanted to look at the file. Okay, so by the way, this is called Moneymaker.
Moneymaker. All right.
So that's pretty good. All right, so yeah, let's get started by uploading our data. We'll browse our files here and grab our CSV, and we had our data preview information.
Okay.
That was super
Column
fast.
information. Let's go
Yeah.
over to our data cleaning. So we can select and rename columns. We can handle missing values, convert data types, filter data, and do feature engineering. So
I mean, this is pretty awesome.
yeah, well, let's see. Let's do the unit price plus the total amount, and we'll call this total unit price.
Man,
Okay.
I was just talking about replacing the BI tools when I just saw your report on the last one, and now it's like, oh, we did it. It took us 5 more minutes though.
Yeah. So now let's see if we can get our bar chart of some
Oh my God.
transactions by quantity. So yeah, I guess we can flip these X and Y
Look at
axes.
it. I mean, it says like horizontal or vertical. Like this is like pretty detailed like stuff.
Yeah.
people ask
Yeah.
about.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
so this
Group
is
by
our-
color.
Let's change this from transaction ID to product name. Make this maybe a bit more meaningful. There we go. And maybe we'll do it by our total unit price, which is our new column that we added.
Nice.
There you go. So that's that. All right. And then we get analysis. So generate descriptive statistics. All right. I don't
Cool.
really know what this is, to be honest.
Some sort of weird histogram.
Yep.
Okay.
And then we'll export our data and generate our report and download the HTML report.
Dang, that was
It's
pretty
marked up
crazy.
And
Ew.
then take a look at our report. Okay. Yeah. This is pretty
It's
pretty
pretty
good.
sick, man.
For a one-shot request. I mean,
Yeah, that's actually that is pretty awesome. Okay, now I'm getting a little more scared about the replacing data science things.
And
Because
then-
Replit might not replace the
gotta
data
keep
scientist, but a data scientist that uses Replit to replace data scientists might.
Oh, yeah.
yeah. All right. And then we have our pricing section. So we can upgrade to premium. Does this work? No, it just sends us to a random domain. Okay. And help and resources. Is there actually a user guide? No. All right. But yeah, I mean, pretty impressive result, to be honest.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Nice. That was awesome. I mean, how long did it take them to build the experimentation platform at Nextdoor? I think I might just build one at Entra with Replit. Like, this is
yeah. Hey, there you go. Hey, you can double your salary.
There's the Hack Day project. There's the Hack Day project.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was a pretty cool demo. I'm glad that you asked, how do we make $1 billion? Because I don't think we would have gone down that path otherwise. And
man,
yeah, that was pretty good.
Wow. That's really cool. Hey, related to that, Colin, do you have examples that you know of organizations that are leveraging AI prototyping in their workflows?
Yeah. So not so much on the data science side. I think there's probably an unexplored area, to be honest, so far. We're the first, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of companies that are using this, like more like the product and design side of things in terms of like testing ideas, mostly small companies. So like, you have like little startups who are doing this. And if you look on LinkedIn, you'll actually see like a bunch of designers and stuff saying like, oh, I'm actually starting in V0 now instead of in Figma, which is pretty cool. But yeah, the only people I can really think of, honestly, are people in my cohort. And I don't really want to out them. I have some NDAs with some of them. So I'm not going to name anyone's off the top of my head, but yeah, if you maybe just look that up on LinkedIn. Designers who are using V0 specifically, that's a common tool. Then yeah, you'll find
for design, like that's something that I'll struggle with sometimes because I have some eye for it, but not really. Like I don't know what the best practices are and stuff. Is that something that V0 does for you, or does designer stuff to like have a lot of input in terms of like the user experience and design stuff?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do one more callback from what we said earlier. Like, if you don't have any knowledge or skill on how to do design, it will do something, and we won't know if it's good or not.
Yeah,
you have like we all use software, so we'll know like generally if it's awful. But like why did it make those choices? Like, are those good user experience choices? Like, because we're not good at that, we don't know. I will say that it's good enough most of the time. Like, if you want to get it to be kind of usable in production, it is good enough. But you're not gonna have like Airbnb quality design through V0, right?
Right. Maybe if you let it run for like 20 minutes, though, like you could get there.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, usually it's that experience we had is actually very uncommon that it would run for that long and produce a functional result. Part of the reason why I think it works is because it's Python and Streamlit, which is like very, very simple to build functional web applications because they just like insert the HTML directly into Python code. It's basically how it works. So that's very straightforward. If we're using like Next.js, that would have 100% broken. There's no way that we would have written 3,000 lines of code and it would have worked.
Yeah. Wow. That's that was an experience to see. That's really cool. And we certainly wouldn't have all the credits in the world to let it write that much. So I think we're coming up on an hour here. So that's been such a fun conversation. One more question, Colin. How do you and maybe like a question for you and also like a question on behalf of the audience. How do you stay updated in AI? Like things are so fast. How do you know like, hey, when is the next V0? When is the next Lovable coming up? And like in general, just how do you keep up?
Yeah, so this is part of my job, to be honest. So like I use Twitter or X a fair amount to just like see what's happening. But honestly, I don't think it's super useful or worthwhile to do that. A good example of this, have you guys heard about MCP servers in the past week or two? Yeah. So I don't know why, but all of a sudden it's like very popular to talk about MCP, which came out in, I think, October of last year. Not that it's that long ago, but it wasn't 2 weeks ago, like when it became popular. And so the point here being that like random things become popular at random times with AI. It just kind of seems that like someone picks it up and then someone else picks it up and it keeps going. And I think the vast majority of people aren't actually using any of it. And so I think if you can just get something functioning, then you're probably already doing great. And I would not worry at all about like, what are all the other tools? What could I be doing? Like, is there some other tool that could somehow make, this workflow obsolete? Probably not, right? If you're getting something that functions at all with AI, then you're probably doing just fine. So like using Cursor, use Replit, whatever tool makes sense. And that's a good place to start and not worry too much, honestly, about the other tools or what's changing too much.
Yeah, it's such a good point. Just like lots of people aren't using anything, and it's kind of intimidating to get started because you're like, where should I start? It's like, just pick something and start doing it, and you might not need to do anything else, but if you do, like you'll kind of figure it out. And then last question, where can our audience kind of like follow you or reach you, keep up with your work? And I know you have a couple like really great courses on this and another stuff you mentioned too, if you want to talk a little bit about those.
Sure. Yeah, LinkedIn and Substack are the primary two. If you want, like, I would say descriptions of technical topics that are catered towards non-technical people. So if you're a data scientist, you've not done web development before, like I have a bunch of content that's catered to people who are new to this space, but is still accurate. That's kind of like what I try to aim for. So you can check out my Substack because I have a bunch of stuff on that. And then on LinkedIn, I post, every once in a while on LinkedIn for just sharing some stuff that is relevant. And then, the courses. So probably not super relevant to this audience, to be honest, but I have technical foundations for PMs. Maybe if you have a PM that you don't like, you can send them my way, and I'll teach them how to talk to you properly. But yeah, so basically I teach PMs how to communicate with engineers and technical teams better, largely by teaching them about system design. And I kind of go through like front to back, like very simple feature architecture stuff into like enterprise environments using like Kubernetes and, like horizontal scaling and RISs and blah, blah, blah. We go through the whole gamut. They make out their own PRs in the course. And so all that good stuff. So they get a lot of like firsthand exposure to development workflows and ideas.
I actually feel like that could be a good course for a data scientist too. Yeah. It depends like who you are, but like it took me a while to get like ramped up onto everything like that. And it was only because I had some like engineering friends who kind of like brought me under their wing. So I think there could still be a benefit from a data science point of view.
Yeah. And again, that one's good if you don't have a strong background in those skills, because I start assuming that you don't know anything, right? Because it's primarily product managers and non-technical folks. And so kind of walk through that whole thing front to back. And then, AI prototyping, again, more catered towards like product or design. But, if you're interested in using these tools and getting better at using them, then, it's something that you could check out. And I walk through kind of all the different techniques and strategies that I use in order to build these, one is just prototypes, and two more functional like kind of side projects.
Nice.
So it starts off with like introducing the tools, going through like, pros and cons or like compare contrast a little bit. There's a lot of like kind of mini side projects, like building your own personal apps and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then the course becomes more technical. So I start talking about debugging strategies, logging, looking at the network tab in, the browser, like how to debug some of the problems that you might run into. Then we go into like making API requests, like integrating with third parties like Anthropic, or if you want to build something that has your calendar in it or connects to Slack or whatever, we go through all that. And then the last section is basically how to like extend it from there. So it's a lot of like talking about cursor and also like kind of pushing the bounds of like how far you can go.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is I built I didn't build it. I shouldn't take credit for it. I worked with a friend to build a Replit template that has Stripe, Google Auth, and Mailgun hooked up to it already. And so you can just copy that Replit template and build a side project, and you don't have to figure out how to get that all hooked up. I did it for you. So
wow,
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's the second one.
So people can accept payments immediately.
Yeah, exactly. You can make your $100.
Like send me money before I let you know what this idea is.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's so
but
cool.
So
that's
those are the two
awesome.
courses. And like I said, Substack, you can check it out. It's mostly free. And you can take a look there if you're interested.
Very cool. We're gonna link those in our show notes, definitely, and our audience can definitely check you out. Cool. With that, Sean, do you want to close it out?
Sure. Yeah. So thanks, Colin, so much for joining us today. Thank you for the like really engaging demo of Replit. If anyone who's just listening here and didn't see it, I would definitely recommend going back and watching it to see how you can make $100, make money fast. But this is a great talk. I learned so much. I'm like ready to get off this call so I can go and like try Replit out, because I tried Chris. I'm like, I want to try some stuff right now. So this is probably one of the most fun podcast episodes. I'm like trying to work on something for my mom right now for a family business. Like, oh, dude, I want to like try and make something.
There you go.
With this. So this is really cool. So thanks so much for your time, and to our audience, definitely check out in the show notes Colin's Substack, his courses, and if you have any question for us or Colin, drop them in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll keep bringing you more content like this. Thanks everyone for listening, and thanks again, Colin, for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks,
everybody.